Sarah, thanks for joining the MedTech Unbox podcast.
Thanks for having me today, Steve. I'm excited to be here.
Likewise, I'm really excited to talk about sterile packaging and some of the other sterilization and some of the services that Canyon Labs provides.
Yeah, I think kind of your audience is a lot more on the upside of where we are in the lab space. So it'll be an interesting conversation to bring those folks to the end of the line where I live.
Absolutely. And related to that, I was thinking about what we're going to talk about today. And we first met at MPP West, and there was a panel session focused on scaling from R&D to production. And if you recall, a lot of the topics discussed during that panel session were related to design for manufacturability, DFM, and how important it is to collaborate both the development folks and the production folks so that we can scale. And I'm part of a team that's has been developing a medical device, a catheter system, and there's a package. There's packaging in a box related to it, and it looks something kind of like this, right?
Yeah.
And we have these meetings, and so much is focused on the functionality, the testing, benchtop testing, first in human, all these things, and the package is it was kind of an afterthought. And we made all these changes to the design, and nobody thought that changing the hub, for instance, would affect the packaging. So I was thinking about design for packaging is also very important, right?
No, it definitely is. I think what you're saying is what we deal with every day on the packaging side of Canyon Labs. It's folks who either, their baby is this medical device and they poured their life into it. And as far as they're concerned, you throw it in a box and it gets somewhere and that works. And there's so much more than just the box to packaging and making sure you're considering all of the design inputs. I'd love to, I guess, kind of talk more today about those considerations that, folks like yourself making a catheter can make when they're designing a package, picking sterilization modalities that fit your device and your package. And then also kind of, I always say marrying the bridge of marketing's wants for packaging and the functionality wants of packaging.
Yeah. That's good. So walk us through the process as a consultative service that Canyon Labs provides for, let's say, a medical device, how you get involved up front and through the entire life cycle and through commercialization.
Definitely. So Canyon has 4 kind of major testing business units, and they are all supported by consulting across each individual one. So the 4 business units that we have are microbiology, chemistry, packaging, and our toxicology biocomp division. Like I said, it really is every kind of testing you would need from start to finish to launch your device and handle all of the FDA guidance and requirements, all of your clinical requirements, all of your end use requirements. And then the consulting divisions that we have are across each one of those. So in micro, it looks a lot like sterilization validation consulting, helping you pick your cycle or maybe switching modalities. On packaging, it's a lot of design. We design packages from the ground up. We write all the protocols and documentation you need for that package and getting all the testing done. We also do a lot of sealer validation. So if you want to even be the person to put your device in the package and seal it up before it, goes off to the market, we can help you pick that equipment, validate it, and get it completely finished on that side. So we really do a full service on the packaging element. If you want to say, this is my device, I want nothing to do with it from a package perspective, we can do that. On the toxicology side, we have a full team of board certified toxicologists. They help design a lot of the biocomp studies and animal studies that you do for launching a medical device. They also do a lot of the chemical characterization data interpretation. So again, that is like more of your final piece. They'll even talk to the FDA for you. And then on the chemistry side, typically speaking, we're helping a lot with extractables and leachables or more complex chemical characterization studies on the consulting side as well.
You mentioned sealing, and I was curious when you mentioned that about seal integrity, I guess, and how that could affect the properties of the device how do you validate or test for that?
Actually testing on the seal of the package.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's kind of 3 stages to your packaging validation in general. So it's all governed under ISO 11607, which is your document on sterile packaging. And it's broken into your sealing process, your transit, or your actual supply chain of getting your device to end use. It's aging, which is like its expiration date, and then its use being how the nurses or surge techs actually interact with that packaging. So the sealing side, you're required to perform a IQ, OQ, and PQ on your machine and your packaging. So that's installation qualification, an operational qualification, and a process qualification. Your installation qualification, I always like to say that's validating the piece of equipment. Is it functioning the way it should? Does it have all the proper hookups or anything it needs to function in a proper way? Then your OQ is more of the actual operation of how do different recipes work with your seal. So you have time, temperature, and pressure. The time that R comes down, the pressure at which it comes down, and then the temperature that it's actually heated at. So that recipe is custom to your package. So during your OQ, you're testing out a bunch of different recipes of time, temperature, and pressure, and you're finding out which ones will fulfill for your package. And then during your PQ, you're testing more of the human elements. I always jokingly call it the people qualification, even not necessarily its official name, but you're looking at your work instructions, your changeovers. Can someone on first shift and third shift still perform the sealing all in the same way? And again, you're building a bunch of different lots of samples and you're testing them to ensure you have that consistency. So that is the kind of basic high level of your sealing validation and how you ensure that it's validatable, it's consistent, and it's safe for that package.
Okay, excellent. That's interesting. All the different environmental factors, temperature, humidity, vibration, and you kind of had a cool little illustration or video that you could kind of compare maybe poor packaging design to the proper packaging design. So go ahead and share that if you'd like.
Yeah, so a little kind of tidbit on this. I talked about kind of your first, second, and third stages or fourth stages of packaging validation. So we talked about the sealing side, then the transit side. And so this this video is what kind of shows what happens during that process. All right, so this video shows a little bit of what a good and bad packaging decide will look like. And so in transit testing, you do a couple different elements. You do drop testing, which drops a box in a bunch of different orientations. Think about any way a FedEx or UPS driver could throw the package off of a truck or, drop it off at a warehouse. And then from there, you go to compression, which mimics, the pressure that other boxes would put on a box at the bottom of a stack. Mm-hmm. And then you go to vibration. And vibration is, I would say drops and vibration are your two biggest dynamic forces that cause failures in packaging. Drops, you could see if this was just shaking around, maybe when you drop it, this syringe slams into the side of this tray and, that causes a crack. So that's probably one of your most common failures in drops. Vibration, which is represented by this video, shows, as things are rattling in a truck or a plane, if you're not containing some of your devices and using good design to mitigate these dynamic forces, your stuff can just slosh all around. And when it's sloshing all around like that, you not only yield opportunities for your device potentially to get broken, you also yield opportunities for these devices to break the packaging. Another one we always see is particulate. These are syringes, which are smooth, but you do this with an arthritic device that has a porous coating on the outside or an abrasive thing. And now when this is shaking around, you're just rubbing that plastic over and over and you can get a lot of particulate. Mm-hmm. So I like to always say, when you're looking at design, really make sure you're thinking about how, your device containment is working, how it's going to actually be, lugging around in the field when it's on a truck or an airplane. One thing that we use at Canyon, and just kind of a shameless plug for them here. This video and this mock was by a company called Dose Insight. And Tobias Funk and his team at Dose Insight, they do a lot of virtual mapping and virtual modeling on packages. And they can see that, before you actually go get this tray made and really put it through the rigor part of package testing, you can virtually do that to ensure that the design that you have is, putting your best foot forward when you hit transit. So their team at Dose Insight, we work a lot with, trial out design before we get too far down the line to find out we spent all this time designing system.
Interesting. Yeah. So they can simulate that. And then you could iterate the design based on those simulations.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Very interesting. Let's move on to, this is really cool. Let's move on to, we talked about design for packaging, design for usability in mind, right? That's also very important for the physician or whoever's utilizing these devices or components. If you can talk a little bit about, walk us through that concept.
Usability is one of my favorite topics. I always say you had transit and your sealing validation and your aging validations have always existed. That was an engineer's world. I'm designing a package with the best expiration date, and it's my engineering mecca. And I feel like the part that always happened was, that engineer thinks this is an awesome design, but then you get a nurse interacting with it, and she's like, this stuff. No. And so to bridge that gap of engineer and end user has been something that's been really at the forefront of the industry for packaging, particularly within the last 5 years. And I think we just keep gaining momentum on it. So previously, you weren't really required to prove usability. And now with some revised standards, you are. And within that, I always like to use the example, we talked about sealing earlier. Made that ideal recipe as an engineer that's going to keep that package super sealed and super safe throughout that whole transit environment that we just looked at. And the thing you might forget is we made this recipe that just sealed the living daylights out of that package, and then you get some nurse who might not lift a ton of weights all the time.
Yeah.
They're trying to open that package, and they open it, and I've seen devices laying across the OR, and it's like, you just paid, I don't know how much for that, really nice device, and now it has to be thrown out because the nurse couldn't get it open, and when it finally opened, it went flying across the room, and now it's,
Right.
So marrying that gap of engineer perfection and reality of use has, like I said, been something that we're really trying to address in the market. And so the usability section of ISO 11607 was added to do that. And you basically have to show that the device is intuitive to open. So it's not like you open a package or see a package and you have no idea where to open it or how to do it. It needs to be easy enough to interact and use. And then you need to be able to aseptically present it. So kind of a passion project of mine. I'm involved in a lot of the industry organizations around aseptic presentation, and the kind of fact behind what we're trying to solve, or the wicked problem, as we call it, are hospital-acquired affections that actually come from someone opening a package in the wrong way. And presently speaking, the wrong way isn't defined. Every way that a surge tech or nurse or whoever interacts with the package typically is dictated by the training that they receive, either from the manager that they learned from, or potentially from AORN, which is your quality of nurses on that side. But those have not combined with the actual regulations and engineers that are designing it. I have people learning to open packages in certain ways, but it's not exactly tied towards what is the way that the package is meant to be opened for people. So we're working on marrying those. And one of the groups I'm a part of is the Kilmer Innovations in Packaging Group. We are the aseptic presentation team. We are trying to tie packaging designs to opening methods and come up with what is the best opening technique for each packaging type or material, so that we can lower the amount of hospital-acquired infections to yield a more safe opening technique per each design. So it's been, I'd say it's been a long road of trying to assess that. We're getting closer. Our group within KIP or Kilmer has made a method to evaluate different opening techniques. And now we're taking that method and really trying to trial it in the real world, have nurses and surg techs interact with packages in different ways and see what has the least amount of opportunity for bacterial transfer to the device or inside the package, and really try to come up with designs and opening techniques that bring the best outcomes for patient.
That's really interesting. I never thought about preventing hospital-acquired infections through packaging design. And I know there's a lot of money that's going into the prevention of hospital-acquired infections because the longer stay in the hospital, mortality, the extra cost on the system and burden on everybody, not only the patient, but the staff. And I never really thought about the packaging design. We always think about the device, and putting silver in it and all these things to prevent which is very expensive, but I mean, the packaging design is an integral part of it as well.
Yeah, no, it is. And I think, to your point, why the packaging is trailing the device standards around HAIs is because people didn't make that connection all the time. But I mean, you open a package wrong and you brush your hand against it, or, it interacts with you in a way that it wasn't intended. You now have opened a ton of microbes to go inside that person that wasn't intended. So
excellent.
Yeah, it's I would say at its infancy, but we're getting better and more, at least investigating it more to have more science behind it.
Right. Okay. Very interesting. Let's move on to sterilization. There's a couple big things that are been happening over the last couple of years in medtech with supply chain. We talked a little bit about PFAS when you and I talked a couple of weeks ago, and sterilization, that's a hot topic. Talk to us a little bit about some trends going on right now in sterilization and what are some of the outcomes?
Yeah, definitely. So this is I would say a taboo, but a hot topic for a lot of people. I think even beyond, PFAS and interactions, you have the similar side on sterilization of gas and whatever kind of legality is going on behind that. So, the medical device realm, you guys are being forced to pick different coding or, look at things that aren't PFAS oriented. I think on the sterilization side, you're being looked at as, should I get out of EO? Should I try to come up with something more sustainable? Am I at risk? And I think this is an ever-changing landscape. You're over, I think it's 75% of the devices in the market presently are either only capable of being EO sterilized or are EO sterilized. And so it is the thing that everybody knows. It's the easiest, it is the most readily compatible, and it is the most readily available sterilization modality that's out there for medical devices. In the past couple of years, you had facilities get shut down by the EPA for their emissions of EO. The FDA came out with their publication sharing that, the gas of EO is a cancer-causing agent. So then that in turn made a bunch of lawsuits come against those facilities because of the emissions that affected the towns around them.
Mm-hmm.
That shut down quite a few facilities in the United States. It's made it a very litigious environment in the United States as it relates to EO sterilization. And I think it's a double-edged sword. You say it's, it could cause issues and it is a carcinogen, but it is also, I don't want to call it a necessary evil necessarily. It is for the medical device realm. There are so many devices that rely on it. It has been the most readily used and compatible modality. And if you don't want to see major disruptions to the medical device market, you need it. Yeah. You're balancing the, I would say a lot of the shutdowns that you're having right now through some of the lawsuits with the need of the medical device community. And I think with that, we then also had new EPA regulations come into play, and you're requiring facilities to ensure that they have, less and less emissions. They have abatement systems that, scrub the gas before it goes out. And, we're doing a lot to ensure the safety of EO, but you still have this, stink behind it from a lot of the litigations that were present a couple of years ago. So, you're marrying a lot of politics and needs of the market. And I think it has caused more and more people to try to look for alternatives to EO. The leading one presently would be gamma.
Mm-hmm.
But gamma radiation sterilization, it has a couple downfalls too. It is reliant on cobalt, and that is a limited resource. So if you're talking about sustainability, it might not necessarily be the most sustaining sterilization modality, given that if that resource goes away or we deplete it, you now have no more radiation on that side for gamma. E-beam is the next piece, or electron beam. That I would say is probably the most sustainable sterilization modality that has the most legs at this point, have the most opportunity to really make an impact. Downfalls of E-beam are penetration. You can't penetrate a load quite as good. And if you have electronics or anything that has like a circuit board, it will fry it. So you have some devices that are just not compatible. You also have different material interactions. Like PTFE is listed as poor for gamma. So, when you're looking at alternatives, there's just a lot of factors in it. And then on top of that, you have the FDA come out and say, find us novel modalities. Find us, where's the weird? Where's the funky? What's something different? And that caused a big spur of new modalities to come to market, or novel modalities. A lot of those are still in the trial phases and are trying to get FDA approved and trying to get big companies bought into them. A lot of those are interesting. We work with them at Canyon Labs just because, you're trying to pave the way of validation and testing for them, since they don't necessarily have a written, validation protocol that's normal, just like EO and gamma have. But yeah, I think on sterilization, there's a ton of options. Sustainability is becoming, the hot button item. But I think you also need to look at the needs of the market, not to bring anything political. But I do think that the current administration could change this landscape a ton from what we've been used to in the past as well. So I think what is the past might be different than what's the future. I think there's a lot of factors to consider when you're looking at your sterilization modality. And then I guess just to tie it back to materials and design, back to our packaging conversation here. The thing that I see the most within Canyon, because we are at the end, you designed your catheter already. You're in love with it. And you picked all your materials and you're married to those. You might not have looked at, what are the material compatibilities of my device? What are the material compatibilities with my sterilization, with my packaging? And I find a lot of folks that are, they built their whole device off of some material. They made a package that was supposed to be gamma sterilized, and then they figured out that the material can't be gamma sterilized, or when they gamma sterilize it, it turns funky colors and it's something to consider, just to really make sure that when you are designing that device, getting involved with the subsequent steps that come after it, it's vitally important. And there's a lot of regulations or standards that are trying to help you guys do that. TIR 17 just got revised. The main is one of the main revisions that happened was to Annex A, and that is all around material compatibilities with sterilization. And it's supposed to guide decisions. It has always existed, but it was very based on, I would say, more industry know-how than it was on really clear science. And so when they updated it, I think in 2024 was when it officially came out. it includes more science, and it tries to tell you, good, better, best, or poor, really bad, as far as ratings of materials and sterilization modalities. So the more I think that you can look at things sooner, you can make an end environment better.
Designed for sterilization.
Exactly. Design and every part of it's for
packaging sterilization. Very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. There's a lot going on right now in sterilization. And that's good to know that there's been some more documentation or guidance, we'll say, out there, science-based instead of tribal knowledge-based. Yeah. Okay.
I think just to go on sustainability, since we're kind of a little bit of a theme there, I guess question back to you before I kind of state where we are with sustainability. Are you guys seeing more and more initiatives on the device side to be more sustainable as well? Is that mostly material selection? Is it reducing the size of devices?
That's a good question. I'm asked that a lot, and I don't, on the device side, except for the PFAS and the PTFE concerns, from a device design standpoint, I don't see a lot of it, except maybe on the packaging side, but not on the device side. And people ask if I want. Sometimes people want to know if I want to talk about to join a podcast of theirs to talk about that. And I said, I don't know what to talk about. I haven't experienced it. And not that it's not important. I don't see it.
Well, and it's interesting to see where sustainability being the most broad.
Yeah.
But where that term really starts to dig into phases of the device launch and design and everything says. I think sustainability has become such a popular topic within everything that Canyon does. It's down to the ways we perform certain tests, the materials we use, and our consumables. It's across everything. As far as how it relates more onto your device side and to our packaging and sterilization discussion, you see on the packaging side, people trying to go more towards recycled materials. And that, I think it'll happen this year, but even further than that, we're going to see more and more innovations on the recycled material side. You have all of your big sheeting suppliers, and they're all looking at figuring out ways to have more traceable recycled content in their plastics that you can then make into, your tray or pouch or whatever you choose to have your packaging with. It'll be interesting to see how they address the traceability side of ISO 11607. We haven't been able to get away from virgin materials as much because there's so much traceability requirements. I'm excited to see more of those recycled content pieces used. I think that the low-hanging fruit that people forget about is just make your packaging more efficient. But marketing is going to hate me for saying that, because marketing wants that beautiful package that, has all of its doodads to sell and to look beautiful. But if we can eliminate some of those things or become more efficient in that, we can. I was going to say, you have all those beautiful packages behind you where someone in marketing is going to hate me.
It's a good example. So, in packaging, right? I think all this plastic can be recycled. But
you're also then depending on if the hospital has a good recycling. So they can't.
But this, this catheter shaft here, we're talking about less than 2 millimeters with a wall thickness of like 2 thou. The amount of, and it's a composite, so there's metals and different materials. The amount of material in that catheter is so minimal. It's not even a rounding error when we look at the total usage of plastics. So I don't see how you can, or maybe even would want to utilize recycled material for a delivery system that's going in the body. But there's a lot of plastic here.
Yeah. I was going to say then the packaging piece of it, you can definitely start to use more recycled material. And point, all that extra plastic, got designs that eliminate that. But make it more efficient. It's a lot easier instead of being recycled materials to just use less of it in the first place. So I think the more we can look to reducing some of that, a silly one, but going more toward EIFUs, so your instructions for use, you end up with like a novel in some of those packages. And I don't know about you, but if I was about to get surgery and my surgeon was reading the instructions for use in the little book novel, I probably wouldn't want that surgery. But it's a necessary piece of the device to have, but going more towards electronic IFUs, you now can eliminate a whole book of paper that was in that package. There's many easy, low-hanging fruit ways to become more sustainable in your packaging. I think on the sterilization side, I always kind of not laugh, but you have people that are wanting to get out of EO, and maybe they have EO in the same place they manufacture. So they're making that device, they're putting it in the tray, they're sealing it, they're sending it to sterilization, coming back, and then it's going to distribution. There is no claims trained on this process. And to become more sustainable, they're now going to ship those devices all the way to somewhere else to be a different sterilization modality. And I'm not saying either are right or wrong, but it's difficult to go for a holistic, sustainable approach when the change is now you're shipping this thing 400,000 miles away to get sterilized and then be shipped all the way back. We're looking at the whole, footprint of that on the environment. It might end up being worse. And so it's, I think every time you look at sustainability, to not just get hyper-focused on one thing like recycled materials or, doing E-beam versus EO or whatever it is, make sure you're looking at the whole picture and try and make sure that footprint is being reduced in all.
That's an excellent point. I remember about a year ago, somebody from a major medical device company in Southern California was telling me how through this plastic processing, the scrap, they can't do it in Southern California, so they ship the scrap to Nevada or the other facility in Utah. It's like, it didn't make any sense, right?
Yeah, like that holistic approach might be...
Right, exactly. In the end, it's definitely a net negative. So anyway, I still, there's all these, just to kind of wrap up about, because that's something I'm asked a lot and I don't really have a good answer, but, even this other, for a small catheter, this food tubing where you put the catheter in and the guide wire, this is not polyethylene. This material that can be recycled multiple times without any real loss in mechanical properties. So I think there's a huge opportunity if somebody could figure it out, how to incorporate recycling of these polymers for more sustainable packaging.
Yeah. And to, I guess, a further point on you had brought up about the guy from Southern California shipping back. I do think that is becoming something that is of conversation with the plastic side of packaging too. Is, if you have a sheet and you stamp those pieces out from it, you have the skeletons. What are we doing with those skeletons? Can you send those skeletons back to be reprocessed and remade? As long as it's traceable? Yeah. The traceability piece is hard. But I think, to your point, looking at some creative ways like that we can save or reuse a lot of these that are able to be.
Excellent. This has been really interesting. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Of course. No, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be on the podcast.
Okay. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.